Good morning from Central Europe. Good afternoon, Myanmar. This is Marius Dragomir. I'm the director of the Center for Media, Data and Society at the Democracy Institute. And I want to welcome you today to our program where we will discuss the future of journalism in Myanmar. Let me start by saying that for many decades, the media in Myanmar has had a tortuous journey. Before the end of the military rule in 2011, many of the country's independent media had to operate from abroad, from exile, as the regime didn't tolerate criticism and dissent. When the country opened 10 years ago, many Burmese journalists enthusiastically went back home as they hoped the country would finally embrace democracy and free press. The media reform during the past decade, however, has been slower than expected, leaving many independent journalists and media observers disappointed. But the return of the army to power exactly 3 weeks ago was worse than anybody would have ever imagined, I think. Political observers expect only the worst, and that includes the future of the independent media. The big question now is, will the return of the army mean the return of the dark ages for Myanmar's journalism? Will journalists have to return to exile to be able to do their job independently? What can others, such as international groups, donor organizations, foreign media, do to help? In the next 30 minutes or so, we are going to address these and many other questions with two esteemed experts who have worked in and studied Myanmar's media for a long period of time. We have with us today Sonny Suez, the CEO of Frontier Myanmar magazine, and Jane McElhone, a journalism and media expert with a long experience in Myanmar and the region. Thank you so much for being with us today. Before broaching the first topic with you, just let me remind our followers that they can submit questions for this program, for our guests, via our Facebook page, where this program is streamed live. And of course, we will do our best to answer all. But let me start with a general question for both you, Sonny and Jane. And this is a question about the following. Is it fair to say that after the military took back the power a few weeks ago, Myanmar is back to the days before 2011? Sonny, what do you think?
Well, yes and no. No means because so far we've been operating business as usual. The new minister, Ministry of Information, appointed new minister, and Ministry of Information has sent these new regulations for publishers, what not to do. So basically, they have changed the laws and regulations, but we haven't seen any direct threat to us because maybe they are very busy taking care of other agencies, but it doesn't mean that we can operate as it is for next few months. I think pretty soon they will starting to how do you say, tighten the screws on the media. So these new regulations really limit the press freedom and the freedom of speech and the other rights of the citizens.
Thank you so much. Jane, what's your take on that?
Well, I agree with Sonny's answer of yes and no. And I think one of the big differences now is that there are a lot more private independent media outlets than there were back in 2011, which makes a big difference. And especially around the country, many small media in the ethnic states and regions, and obviously a lot more online media. So all of those media have been doing journalism, and they really have the support of the public. We're seeing that now, but we also saw it grow a lot last year in 2020 with the pandemic and the elections, because people really reached out to the credible independent media because they needed credible information in order to survive the pandemic, and also when it came to understanding the election. And I think it's fair to say that that support is even growing a lot more over the last 3 weeks. You see people on Facebook asking people to support local media in the ethnic states and regions, sending information about the media. I know people who are out buying a lot of copies of print media publications and distributing them in their neighborhoods. And people are doing that because they want access to the media, but it's also offering support. Even in some of the ethnic states and regions, people are saying that despite the fact that most advertising revenues have been lost in the country, some local businesses are still putting ads in the local media. And again, it's not very much money, but it's to show trust and solidarity with the media. So I think the fact that the entire population, for example, today, or many people are out on the streets, those people are really showing support for independent media in a way that didn't exist back in 2011.
Thank you, Jane. So definitely the whoever will be in power will not have the same, it will not be that easy like in 2011 to clamp down on independent media as it was maybe 10 years ago. But now just focusing on the latest developments, because people are following what's happening in Myanmar and what is happening with journalism there. And especially for people who are not there, we don't really understand what are the key events, the key developments specific to independent, to media and journalists. And Sonia, you started to summarize that for us by telling us about the first measures. Can you tell us just in a couple of minutes, what are the key events and developments that are affecting the operation of the media in the country?
Well, I mean, I would basically, I mean, the immediate thing that I can see is that, but the game has changed because of the pandemic. Pandemic really pushed these e-commerce maybe 15 years faster than it should. So people are much more relying on the online media, and then that's the area where government is finding difficult time censoring it, because it's almost impossible at this point. And on the other hand, the sad thing is that because after the military takeover, after the coup, I am seeing some of the news organizations, the newsrooms basically resign because they don't want to follow the self-censorship within the organizations, like the media owners starting to interfere the newsroom, don't do this, don't do that. And I'm seeing a lot of, I mean, reporters leaving. And also I just, like a few days ago, Myanmar Press Council, 15 members of Press Council, they basically resigned because they don't want to acknowledge the new government. So those are the updates in Myanmar, and hopefully these reporters who just lost their job will be able to survive, because I am really worried about them as well, for their security as well as their well-being.
Yeah, thank you, Sonia. Just very quickly, for those who are not familiar with the situation you mentioned, the Myanmar Press Council. Can you tell us in 2 words what that is?
Okay, sorry. So Myanmar Press Council is the body that previously, this was recognized by the president, and president basically signed for the approval of forming this Myanmar Press Council. And Myanmar Press Council is it's basically taking care of how do you say, bridging between the government and the publishers and the journalists, and they've been trying their best. And now 15 people, members, just basically resigned because they don't want to recognize the new government.
Thank you. Well, now that we start to understand what is happening now, looking at the future, which I guess is the most difficult part, I was just reading a report from the Media Development Investment Fund that was you led, Jane, and that was published right before these events, right? And in that, I saw a quote from Frontier Myanmar that was saying the following, and I quote here: "The media industry can't afford to go backwards. Only the media businesses that keep grabbing opportunities will survive." Well, in light of the recent events, how do you see now the future of Myanmar's media as a business, as a market, as an industry, Jane?
Well, over the last year in 2020, obviously COVID-19 already had a big impact on Myanmar media businesses, and most, if not all, suffered significant revenue losses. But at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, so just a few weeks ago, we could already see some recovery. And actually, in some cases, some outlets were doing better than they had been doing in the pre-pandemic period, because they'd adapted to this new online environment that Sunny was just referencing. So especially in the online and the television sector. But that has all changed with the coup. Most media outlets have immediately taken a big hit in terms of especially traditional commercial advertising revenue, and especially from the bigger Yangon advertisers where people were able to make the most money. So a lot of contracts are frozen, and it's uncertain what will happen next. I mean, for the entire business sector, of course. I mentioned a few minutes ago that some outlets in the ethnic states and regions are still getting some ads from local businesses, but again, that's bringing in very little money, and it's really more a question of trust and solidarity, showing support for the media. The two private independent broadcasters are no longer able to broadcast from inside the country. Digital media are continuing to operate, but they're threatened by a pending cybersecurity law. And I mean, some media are still making money from alternate revenue sources such as YouTube and Facebook, some from content sales, donations from readers and supporters, but it's really, they say, too soon to tell, you know, what the impact will be on those sources as well. So, I mean, print media is quite interesting actually, because it was one of the hardest hit by the pandemic. And it's also lost a lot of important ad revenue. But media across the country are reporting that there's an increased interest in buying print media. So they've been increasing circulation, and which means that their sales are up as well. Now, how significant that will be in terms of being able to survive as businesses is another question. But it's an interesting trend to see that that's happening right now. So I guess overall, there's a variety of different things happening in the market. And when you look at the pandemic and how Myanmar media businesses reacted to it and really showed resiliency, I think that it really, in a way, prepared media to be a lot more flexible and nimble and creative. So there's a hope that maybe that will help media survive what is going on right now. But definitely overall, the impact is financially devastating. And it means media are having to sit down and totally rethink their business plans. And it's obviously going to mean a lot more outreach to donors, to other kinds of supporters, or to the parent companies that own the media for support. So it's having a really a kind of emergency short-term and longer-term impact on the sector. I don't know, Kosani, if that has been your experience.
Thank you, Jane. Yes,
Definitely.
Sonia, what has been your experience? And now talking about that and about the future, as you said, the situation is not the same as 10 years ago, and now people are in the streets. There is a strong pushback from many media. What is your situation now, and can you tell us more about what you expect from the future? Do you expect journalists to, I don't know, some of them go back into exile, fight from within the system, give up, or find other jobs, or else?
Well, I mean, our immediate challenges, the internet blackouts. We hope that it's going to get better, because that's everything is. The e-commerce is very much improved in Myanmar because of pandemic, and the way we reaching out to our audiences is very, very different now. And I never think media as a business. I think you really have to have a huge passion to be in media business, because you have a better chance to get end up in prison rather than get rich, that sort of thing. So I can't really talk to you on behalf of the exile media what they're going to do. But for us, what we've been doing is trying to, we are trying our best, continue publishing very factual contents. And that's the safest way to do. And try to avoid not too emotional about what's going on, and sending our reporters on the ground every day. I mean, now they are very tired, they're getting sick. And I mean, we just can't stop. You know, this is 24/7, and we have a routine internet blackouts from 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. Every morning. That's pretty much, that's when I think everybody take a break from the screen time. And I can't really tell you the future, how the future lies in terms of the Myanmar media landscape. What I can tell you now is that we're going to have to work within the system and push as much as we can, not to insult anyone, any institution, and try to avoid any emotional feelings, and be factual and do proper fact checking again. So that's our strategy for the short term. In terms of revenue and everything stops because of the social disobedience movements. All the bank stops, and everything's, it's kind of messy at this point, and trying to maneuver a media company at this point is quite challenging. But we are all, I mean, me and the whole team, we are all on the same page, and we will basically do our best. I think be very careful in terms of not to get caught, and not to get the COVID, because I'm worried that I don't want to see this super spreaders because of the demonstrations, and that's the health issue is also part of it. And safety comes first. That's our I think main priority is safety of our reporters at this moment.
Thank you so much. Well, I just want to remind our followers that they can send questions. We started to see the first ones coming, and I have lots, but let's just give the voice also to those who are following us. There is a very specific question. I don't know if any of you wants to take that on. The question is the following: do you think that the suspension of the Myanmar Times license is the first attempt to curb the media? And do you think this might be efficient going forward, particularly in blocking the access to information for non-Burmese speaking foreigners? Any of you wants to comment on that?
Well, I haven't heard that the license was being suspended. I haven't heard that. But what I've heard was that they had to suspend 3 months, according to the internal memo, because basically there is no enough reporters to continue publishing. So I don't think it's come from the government or yeah, any kinds of regulations.
Thank you. But on this note, again, for those followers who are not that familiar with the situation in Myanmar, so every news media in the country needs license, right, to operate, even if you are a broadcaster or an online media. Is that correct?
Correct. So to give you a bit of a background, print media and broadcast media is completely different. So we have a print media law, which has passed already, and the broadcast media law just passed, like I think 3-4 weeks ago. And in terms of the press freedom, is also completely different. Print press freedom is way better than the broadcast freedom. Depends on the media owner again. And we have to have a printing license and the publishing license separately.
And these licenses are awarded by the authorities, I assume?
Yes, correct.
That's correct. Okay, this leads me to another question, which has to do with the media reforms over the past decade. And when there have been promises of media reforms in the country, there was a discussion at some point about the liberalization of the broadcast market, which meant that a discussion about allowing new entrants into the market. At some point, we were doing with some of our experts a study on the idea of restructuring the state media and reforming that space. I'm not sure whether this was a serious discussion or just some promises, but generally about the media reforms in the country, do you think that those in power will end these efforts? What do you expect there? Jane, you want to comment on that?
Well, just briefly, really, the reform period was a long time ago. There was really maybe in 2013 and 2014, early on with, abolishing pre-publication censorship, etc. But I think people have been very disappointed with reforms that weren't instituted under the NLD government, and whether that was in terms of making the broadcast law functional so that people could actually start applying for licenses. I think that the idea of transforming the state broadcaster into some kind of public broadcaster was a non-starter. In fact, over the years, the size of the state media has increased in terms of broadcasting, in terms of print, state media around the country. So I think overall it's fair to say that there has been great disappointment in terms of any reforms that have happened to date. Though there has been some progress, of course. It's a very different environment, but there are no expectations that any of that will continue. On the contrary, anything that stands in the way of the military will be revised or gotten rid of in some ways, as well as new laws passed that will be used to control the media. So because, as has happened in the past, I think a lot of outlets are expecting that that there will be a lot of lawsuits or threats of lawsuits and imprisonments to try and control the media, as well as you say, threats to not renew licenses so that media will be unable to operate. So, and it's not just the media laws that are used against the media, of course. There are a wide range of laws that are used, especially in terms of defamation, to try and control the media sector.
Thank you. Sonny?
Well, if you're looking at the situation now, this military regime, let's say 95%, it's going to be bad, right? But we still have this 5%, and I'm always optimistic about the situation, because if we look at the history, the press freedom really grew between 2010 and 2015 under the U Thein Sein's government, which is the military. He's an ex-general, and he was really working on this media reform throughout his terms. And then that's kind of stopped from 2015-16 onwards, which is the NLD government. So if this new government is thinking of private media development, or if they really care about media and importance of media, then there is a 5% that you never know what's going to happen, because this country, you can never guess. Sometimes you expect something and you are, it turned out to be totally different. So let's wait and see, I think, but we have to be optimistic no matter what. We have to just keep on working hard, and that would be my mentality at this point.
Thank you. Well, one question that is everybody is trying to answer these days, these dramatic moments of change in the country, is how and who can help independent journalism and journalists in Myanmar that probably I suppose need support more than ever. If you agree with that, what do you think? Who are the key players you think should step in and support the country's journalism, and of course how? Jane, what do you think about that?
Well, there are already a lot of players supporting the media sector. That doesn't always mean the support is effective, but just that there are already a lot of quite varied players. And there's been support for a very long time, predating 2011. So in some ways it's a crowded field already. And of course, especially in these days, one needs to be very discreet about who's involved and the level of support. So I would say discretion is the key. And if there are new players that want to get involved, that I think it's important to reach out to people they trust who are already involved in the sector, be that the media themselves or people supporting them who have long experience and who can provide some guidance. And I think just watching what's been happening over the past few weeks, flexibility is also key, because there is funding, there is money out there, but it's not always accessible and it's not always flexible. And so, you know, in terms of rapid response, with thinking about safety, which Kosani emphasized was very important at this point. So that's also something to think about. And I know that in some cases, people who are providing funding have ensured that it's very flexible, and that has made things much easier for the media operating on the ground. But of course, everyone is facing bureaucracy, and that's not always easy. So I think those are some of the things that are important in the field right now. Whether new players are needed, I think that if things continue to be difficult in terms of financially managing the media, because again, what is important now is the content, and you don't want everyone having to focus entirely on the money side of media, because they need to focus on content. So I think that after flexibility, to be thinking on the long term of providing funding support that will allow people to plan for different eventualities, because nobody knows what's going to happen. And it's important right now to think about how to support the media that are working inside the country so they can continue operating. But I know that some media are already thinking that the worst case scenario is going to happen, and they're starting to plan for what might happen if they have to leave the country. And that all of those kinds of actions demand financial support. But again, above all, discretion is key in all of this.
Thank you, Jane. Sonny?
I couldn't agree with Jane. I mean, more. I totally agree with Jane. And also, I would like to sound out to those tech giants. Please provide us the training and the platform, the tools. This time is the most needed. So please adjust your algorithms in Myanmar, and this demonstrations, it has to be, we have to say out loud, and please do something about it. And also, please, for the other institutions, organization, also, I'm worried about these freelance reporters. They don't have their own media houses, newsrooms, so they are running around on the street, risking their lives. They might get arrested, and they can't even show their press cards. So for their safety and protection is very important. So please do not ignore these freelance reporters as well. That's pretty much it.
Thank you very much. Well, I really hope that the message of both of you will reach out to those who care about the country and who care about the country's journalists. With that, I want to end this discussion here. I want to remind our followers that the recording of this discussion is available, of course, on Facebook and on our channels, including the YouTube channel of our center. I want to thank a lot Jane and Sonny for making time to talking to us today. It's really important that people understand what is happening in the country and what the future of the country's journalism is. I also, of course, want to thank our followers and the people who are interested in these issues. Thank you very much, and I really hope to see our audience next time with another program talking about journalism today. Thank you so much. All the best.